microphone speakers. You should be able to hear me, but you won't be able to see me. I can't see you, and I can't hear you, however loud you shout. So to enable questions to be dealt with, of which normally there's quite a few, and I'm more than happy to deal with, best thing to do is, as soon as you think of something relevant to ask, stick it in the facility on your GoToWebinar toolbar, just rattle it in, and then when we get to the end of the session, I'll let you know that we've done. Those that need to disappear and are able to listen to the answers, you'll be free to go. Those who want to hang on and listen to the answers, irrespective of whether you've asked a question or not, you're more than welcome to hang on until I've answered all the questions. I normally get to answer everything, and with the numbers on tonight, that should be possible. So again, I'll remind you of that during the session and towards the end, and we'll deal with the questions then. In terms of what we're going to cover tonight, two subjects, unsurprisingly. One is, they are linked, no pun intended, but one is how to effectively write an effective CV and then replicate that within your LinkedIn profile so that you go to market if you're looking for jobs now or intend to be looking for jobs in the foreseeable future, or just want to build a credible profile so that people can spot you and see your worth. Then we're going to be covering content that will materially improve your chances of getting that sorted, and will make a difference if you get it right. As importantly, perhaps, we'll look at some of the things that, if you're doing them right now, will hold you back, and possibly explain why you're not getting the level of interview success that you might expect to get, if that applies, or things that you can do to prevent problems occurring in the future. So most of these sessions, the feedback we get genuinely is that they're helpful, they answer queries, and they give practical advice. So it's not just a top 10 tips of what to do without any substance. I'm going to show you how to construct a CV more effectively, and so that actually works in the marketplace for you, and then use those lessons to tackle your LinkedIn profile for those that have got such a thing. And if you haven't, some pretty good reasons as to why you should consider getting a LinkedIn profile. Okay, so briefly first, just explain a little bit about who on earth we are. So Talentspa invited you to this evening's event. We're a partner with Talentspa, but a separate business, and the business, unsurprisingly, as you'll see at the bottom of the screen, is called the CV and Interview Advisors. So the reason I mention this is because it's important you understand that we're coming at this session from a point of, well, hopefully some credibility. We spend a lot of time providing CV writing advice, LinkedIn profile writing advice, interview coaching, advice to people's companies, recruiters, to improve the quality of the material that they're dealing with. And by material, I mean principally candidates, individuals, applicants. So we know our stuff, or we'd like to think we know our stuff. My background, just to really make you feel hopefully comfortable that I've seen how a CV is used from a number of different angles. In my earlier life, I was in corporate life. I have recruited people as an employer. I've recruited people as a recruiter for my sins. I've then gone on to work with this current business. I've reviewed literally thousands of CVs and given advice to people surrounding that subject, and written CVs as well, occasionally. So what I'll be talking about this evening, we know works in the marketplace. So if you follow the advice, if you're in a bit of a fix right now, or you think you might be going forwards, if you follow the steps I'm going to be talking about this evening, it will materially make a difference to your success in the marketplace. And we know that because of the feedback we get from people we work with. It's not just a great idea that we had one day when we woke up in the morning. It's actually stuff that works. The rest of the team that I work with are of similar ilk. Interestingly, we have some published authors amongst our mix. They tend to be very good CV writers. I'm not going to get into a debate about whether they're fact or fiction authors, but the reality is, if you know how to write content, that's an important quality, as will become clear later this evening. I'm going to be mentioning a few cliches, if you like, because they're the best ways of describing some of the material, hot skills being one of them. If you don't know what the hot skills are in your particular market sector, and some people, those skills are very specific and known, some of them are harder to get to. We'll touch on this subject later, as I say, but it is important that you understand what they are, and if you don't know what they are, seek help. Now, we happen to know in most sectors what the hot skills are, and they do evolve and change, and so it's important that you get a feeling for what they might be. And rather crudely, and at the bottom line, again, really just to prove the point, whoever writes an effective CV, and so we'd like to include ourselves in that camp, if it's done properly, it will make a difference. Now, smash down doors is a bit aggressive, understandably, but it's to make a point. If you get your CV right, you'll get more interviews, as simple as that, and we'll show you how during the course of this evening. That's enough about us. Before we get into the detail of how to construct a CV, it's probably quite important to realise and start thinking about your own document. So you might have your CV in front of you, you might have recently written it, it might be vaguely familiar in the back of your mind. Whatever, start thinking about your CV and relating some of the comments I'm about to make to your own document and circumstances. So a lot of people start off when they build their CV, and it is a mistake to do this to some degree, and they just compile basically a list of things that they've done. So that could be the jobs, the education that they have, how people should get hold of them, and hobbies and interests and stuff like that. And you might think, well, yeah, what on earth is it supposed to be then? If it's not a list of things, what is your CV supposed to be, and what should it represent? Well, we'll come on to that in a bit, but if you're just presenting a list of things to your audience, and I keep using the phrase tonight, as well as hot skills, I'll be talking about your target audience quite a lot. The target audience is whoever your CV is going to, and ultimately whoever's going to make a decision on whether you should be interviewed. So that's partly a recruiter, possibly, partly an HR person within an employer, partly the hiring manager who's going to be making a decision on whether they actually interview you if you get to that stage. So your target audience is critical. Now, just imagine if you bought anything recently, your own selves, if you bought a house, a car, a piece of domestic equipment, furniture, whatever, it's highly unlikely you will have bought it principally by getting a list of things about that product, i.e. just size, length, width, height, weight. You won't have gone rushed out to buy a fridge because it just happened to be a certain size or weight. It might have been a material fact, but it won't have been the sole reason. You've got to start thinking yourself, if you don't already, of as being a product or a service in the marketplace. So if somebody's going to buy you, in effect pay you quite a lot of money every year, they're going to expect a return on that investment. So whatever you send to them to try and entice them to interview you and consider you for a job, you've got to present a pretty strong argument to that target audience as to why they should consider you. And it's a harsh fact of this world, however good you are as an individual at your job, we'll touch on this later, most recruiters and hirers won't know you from Adam. They can only judge you based on what you send them. If you send them just a list of basic facts about you without any enhancement, without any supporting evidence to back up why you're a good candidate, you probably won't be getting interviews. The people that might be getting the interviews will have an effective document promoting them. They might not be the best candidate, but they will appear to be so. That's one of life's harsh realities about perception and reality. So a list of things is not a good idea. Just to support that, if you've ever applied for a job in the public sector in the UK particularly, or some large-scale private sector employers, and increasingly one or two medium and smaller sized employers, if you ever had to fill out one of these rather lengthy application forms online, typically, where you get boxes that you're required to enter an amount of text and deal with a question that's something like, please give us an example of the last time you experienced this, or tell us of a time when you handled a situation like, and often you have to do it in less than, say, 250 words or 1,000 characters or whatever. And lots of people get those kind of application forms and think, I don't like these. Why are they asking these questions? It takes so long to fill in the detail. What possible reason could they want for having to know this information? And if that frustrates you, that in a way is telling you that your CV is not actually going to perform in the marketplace, and what you've currently got on your CV is probably not the right content. The reason why employers ask for this information is to be able to filter out people and make a decision on who to interview. So the content is used to judge you. they know damn well as an employer that most CVs they get are actually not very good, so they can't make a decision based on the CV, so they force you to fill out a form and then they make a decision based on that content. So those forms are critical. Filling them out is really important in getting the information right, and the kind of content that you need to put into those forms is what we're going to be talking about this evening. So if you find those things frustrating and don't have the content readily to hand, and it's certainly if it's not on your CV, then it probably points to the CV being ineffective. And the other thing you should consider is if you've got a CV that's largely the same as in terms of its format and structure as when you left school, college or university, and particularly if your career is more than 10 years old, and all you've done is add to the CV over time, again, things have moved on a lot now, and that probably points to your CV being ineffective. So on a more positive light, given all those things that you shouldn't be doing, what should you be doing? Well, our view is, and it's substantiated by results in the marketplace, is that you should present a business case. I hinted at this earlier. You are a product or service, whether you like it or not. View yourself as that. You're almost like a mini brand, the brand of you, your name. You've got skills and abilities and competencies. You need to let the world know what they are, not in an egotistical way or an aggressive way, but in a way that actually presents you and what you've got to offer as a solution to somebody's problem. And that's a business case. If you've ever had to go to, get a loan, either for you personally or if you're working in a business where you're having to justify somebody making an investment in new capital equipment or a car or a piece of hardware or software, it's very rare you can just turn up and say, please give me the money, I need to go and buy this. You need to present a case to whoever's making a decision, who's going to authorize that. View yourself as that business case. You've got to build for your target audience a business case as to why they should even consider interviewing you, let alone hire you. We'll touch on this a lot more detail later. So brutally, a bad CV is just a list. So if your CV contains some kind of rather bland opening statement, we're going to talk about those in a minute, then education, possibly, then just a list of jobs that you've done with your employer dates, times, job titles, duties and responsibilities, maybe copied from a job description or something similar. If you've got a CV like that, then I would suggest it's probably going to underperform in the marketplace. A good CV, therefore, is one that presents a positive business case to your target audience as to why they should hire you, and there is a massive difference between the two. Again, I'll show you a real-life example later and some of the content. That's what we're going to be talking about. Now, for those people who've got a CV that is pretty much the same structure as when they left school, college or university, or is old-fashioned and they've just not bothered to update it, other than adding the jobs that they've done, the other trap a lot of people fall into is that the world's moved on, the internet's not that old, there's plenty of people out there whose career started pre-internet days and certainly pre-database days. The CV now needs to be written in such a way that it not only looks good aesthetically, has the right content, builds a business case for your target audience, but needs to be searchable, needs to be visible when people with all sorts of abilities start looking for you. Now, if you've ever used Google, which most of you will, or any other well-known search engine, you'll know that you can type in just one word, a phrase. You can use all sorts of clever tricks called Boolean logic to filter your search criteria and get a really narrow type result. But if you don't know how to use those skills, you tend to get a very broad set of results whenever you do a search. It's the same with recruitment databases, job board databases, and employer databases. If you really know how to use the software, you can probably get a fine-tuned search, but if you don't, you'll get presented with all sorts. And you need to deal with that on your CV. Your CV needs to be able to cope with those different levels of ability on the other side of the table, so to speak. And one of the ways you do that is making sure it's full of keywords and phrases that we know people are searching for. Most people who've got a career, as I say, of probably over 10 years or so, have not built a CV to work in the modern world. I mentioned early on that I'd give you some kind of diagnostic checks. The most important one, so there's two really strong messages in this session so far, one of which is the CV should be a business case. So if there's only one thing you take away from this evening, it ought to be that, and really be ruthless. Look at your CV and say, am I actually presenting that business case to my target audience? The second thing is that if you're actively in the market right now, or you intend to be in the not too distant, or you've got the statistics from some recent job hunt to answer this question, the acid test for whether your CV is doing its job or not is how many interviews you're getting versus the number of applications you're making. Now, there's some caveats here. If you're a checkout operator and you're trying to become a nuclear submarine captain, that's clearly not going to happen anytime soon, and it doesn't matter what I or anybody else in my team or anybody else in the world is going to do, other than somebody being mentally deranged. They are not going to give you that nuclear submarine to captain in a hurry, whatever you send them. So, although that's a bit of a silly example, an extreme, you'll be surprised how many people go to market and start applying for jobs they're in no way capable of performing. So remove that from the equation. So, I don't know, let's say you're a management accountant, you want to become a senior management accountant or a financial controller, or if you're a teacher at certain key stage level and you want to elevate to another level, or a different kind of school, or a larger school, or if you're a project manager and you want to become a senior project manager or program manager. Those are logical moves. They might be a stretch, that's fine, but they're logical moves. You've got the competencies, you believe you could perform those kind of roles. So let's imagine you then apply for 10 of those kind of jobs. If you're getting interviews to 8, 9, or all 10 of those jobs, your CV is doing fine. You should probably leave the building right now and get on with something else in your life. Happy days, in other words. Most people aren't that fortunate, in fairness. So let's imagine, if we step back to the other extreme, if you're getting no interviews at all out of those 10 applications, or maybe only 1 or 2, it depends whether that's enough to get you to job offer stage. You know, you only need 1 job offer to make it all worthwhile. But typically, it's a big pipeline, a funnel kind of approach. You need to make a certain number of applications to get to first interview, and then to get that to second interview or assessment centre, and then ultimately to get a job offer. So if you're happy with the ratio and it works for you, then again, that's probably okay. But if you're in that realms of not getting many interviews at all, I guarantee you one thing, in 99 times out of 100, it's the CV that's the problem. People blame it on all sorts of reasons, you know, economic circumstances, there was somebody better for the job. You get all sorts of feedback from recruiters about why you might not have got selected for interview, but the harsh reality is it's nearly always down to your CV, the message that you're sending. The difficulty is it's very difficult to get that feedback honestly from folk, and you might have experienced this already. It's very, very rare that somebody will turn around to you face-to-face or over the phone or via email and say, I'm sorry, Joe Bloggs, you're not going to get an interview, and the reason you're not going to get an interview is your CV is just horrendous and completely misrepresents what you're about. People just won't say that. There's no reason for them to do so, in fairness. They don't want the hassle or the grief. But I guarantee to you, if you're not getting interviews and you're applying for jobs you know you could perform, it's all about the message you're sending to the recruiter or the employer. There are very few exceptions to that rule. So if you've already got the stats, you can now reflect and think, okay, that maybe is the problem. You know, what do I do about it? Well, we're going to come on to that shortly. If you're not yet in a position where you can collect those statistics, then you have to make a decision, really, and that is, do I suck it and see? Do I start applying for jobs and see what happens? If you've got the luxury of lots of jobs to apply for, you could argue that's a fair course to take. Or you've got to start thinking, is what this guy's saying making any sense? Yeah, it does sound a bit close to the mark. Maybe I should do something. And that's something, obviously, you have to make a personal decision on. We're going to take a look now at the structure of the CV. So if we were writing your CV right now, this is broadly the approach that we take for most of our clients. Now, obviously, there's all sorts of customization and personalization, but the structure and the kind of content I'm going to be talking about is where you need to be heading to build this business case. So that's the key part of this section now, is how do we build a business case. So we recommend starting with some kind of opening statement. We tend to call it a professional or an executive summary. It doesn't matter what you call it. The most important thing is that you avoid certain mistakes that most people tend to make. So I bet you, of all the people attending this evening, there are a fair few who talk about, in their opening statement, either their career objective that they might have, the enthusiasm that they possess, the interpersonal skills that they possess, the dynamism, commitment, passion, and the classic working in a team or as an individual, and effectively at that. Those are all lovely things to have, but they're ridiculously impossible to prove on a CV, and therefore shouldn't be on the CV. And often people find that reasonably controversial. Folk are told to put that kind of thing on their CV. It is, I guarantee you, a heap waste of time. So what should be put in its place? Well, it all should be factual and demonstrable. That's one key thing. And the best way of starting any kind of statement on your CV is describing what you are. So imagine a recruiter or employer is looking for, let's say, a project manager. You pretty much want to say on your CV as quickly as possible that you are a project manager. Now, you have to be a bit careful here. I'll show you an example shortly. You don't need to reflect what your precise job title is here, particularly if you've got an odd job title. So if you're in a role right now that's got a strange job title, it doesn't mean anything to most other folk, causes confusion, and you're continually having to explain to people what it actually means, you don't want to be using that on your CV much at all. You want to be describing your generic skill. What's the generic title for the kind of work you do? So if you're a teacher, you probably want to limit to the level of teaching that you're at, be it at primary, secondary, state, independent. If you're a project manager, you could probably get away with just a project manager. If you're qualified with particular skills like Prince 2, you'd want to mention that probably. If you're a graduate or got an MBA, you'd probably want to insert that kind of phrase before then describing the broad expertise that you've got. But you need to reflect as clear and as closely as possible whatever that recruiter or hiring employer is looking for. You need to try and state that that is what you are. The reason why that's so important is because you probably don't realize how many other people are applying for the jobs that you are and how far adrift some of them are from remotely getting an interview. You don't want to fall into that pile of people that appear to be wrong for the role. So talking about enthusiasm, interpersonal skills, commitment, passion, you've got nothing to do with what that employer is actually looking for to decide whether to interview you or not. They don't like all those skills, and they will assess them at a much later stage in the recruitment process. So putting them on your CV is wholly pointless because it will not decide whether you get an interview or not. In an ideal world, if you could precisely describe in this opening statement on your CV that you could solve the problem that that recruiter and their client is having or has, you probably get an interview all the time. But you're not always knowing what those key things are, what you need to address. But you can get pretty close to it. So start off by saying what you are. And I mentioned some cliches would crop up. This is another one, I'm afraid, but it is really important. After you've described what you are, so let's say you're a Prince 2 qualified project manager, what's your value proposition? That's the reason that you exist, the core value that you could bring to that business. So it's not about you in the sense of look at me, look at me. It's about thinking, okay, these guys, if they're wanting a project manager, they're likely to want somebody who can either deal with a certain size of projects, a certain nature, sector, possible value, but something where you can offer an ability to deliver, and that could be in delivering to time, to budget. You need to be describing that proposition, the reason why you exist, and in a way justifying why somebody is about to sink 35, 40, 50, 125,000 pounds a year in you, or whatever it is. I'll show you an example shortly. Then you follow that with some things you're reasonably good at, typically 2, 3, 4 things that define what you're able to deliver and bring to the party, so to speak, functional, demonstrable stuff. And crucially, all of those need to be linked to these infamous hot skills. So I guarantee every employer has got a list that they're looking for. Some are obvious, some are not so obvious. They tend to be generic for the kind of job. So if you are a project manager, most employers will be looking for a similar level of skill within that job. Ditto if you're a teacher, a dentist, or a architect or whatever. those hot skills will be pretty similar, but you need to make sure you're positioning your opening statement to what those skills are. I said I'd show you an example, and shortly I'll show you a real-life CV with some more information on it so you can see how it all fits together. But just read this paragraph. I'm not going to read it verbatim now, but just take a look through this. This is obviously for a relatively senior finance person. I would stress it doesn't matter what level you are, whether you've just left school or whether you've got a 25-year plus career, in whatever sector you are, whichever country you work in, whoever you work for, whether you work for anybody right now or not, whether you've got a consistent career, an inconsistent career, it matters not. Everybody at any level, anywhere, can write an opening statement that addresses these issues. What most people tend to do is ramble on about all the things that they think are important but aren't. So you'll notice in this particular opening statement, it doesn't mention anything about ability to work as an individual or as part of a team. And that's got nothing to do with how senior this person is or not. It's just that you can't prove that on a CV, so why mention it? It's not going to get you the interview, so why mention it? Focus on the stuff that is going to make a difference. So in this case, what are they? They're a finance director. What's the value proposition? They can protect cash flow and profitability. What are they particularly good at? There's a list of things. Are they aligned with hot skills in the marketplace? Well, we have to assume that they are. They sound pretty good. Crucially, all the things that are mentioned in that opening statement can be proven later on the CV, as we shall see. That is the first part of building your business case. It's the opening paragraph on your CV, and something like that will make a huge difference. Just bear in mind that most recruiters and employers, you might have heard this statistic and you'll hear variations on the theme. But if there are any more than, I don't know, 30, 40 applicants for a job, you are likely to get 5 to 30 seconds of somebody's time before they decide whether you're going to be part of the process or not. So don't assume that people are going to sit down with a cup of coffee and read your CV at length, absorb it all, understand the nuances, fill in the gaps, and come to the same conclusion you'd like them to. It just doesn't happen. The only time it does happen is if it's a senior role or the number of applicants is so low somebody's got the time to do that. Most recruiters and HR folk within employers do not have that time. They're bombarded with applications. Some of them are a complete waste of time. Some of them are valuable. Sorting the two out is not as easy as you might think. Just differentiating between which ones to interview and which not sometimes becomes a bit of a lottery. And that's nearly always down to the quality of the CV, not the quality of the person doing the recruiting or hiring. That's a bit of an over-exaggeration, but normally the biggest problem is CV content. So fix that, and you start to see people almost sigh with relief as they see somebody who's approached the whole job application process a bit more professionally. You started to provide the evidence that the recruiter or hiring manager is looking for, and you'll suddenly see an increase in the level of interview and traction that you get with your CV. I'm going to talk about one more section before showing a real-life example of this CV to show you how it all fits together. Before I get into this particular section, a quick reminder that if you've got any questions that you want answering, just type them into your GoToWebinar facility, the toolbar, and I'll deal with them at the end of this session one by one. Now, at the bottom of this slide, there's a comment which at first glance may seem obvious for those that might already have scanned it, and it is that the vast majority of recruiters and hiring managers make their shortlisting decisions based solely on the contents of your CV. Big deal, you might think. Well, how else are they going to make that decision? And that is exactly the point. It sort of links back to what I just said. Yeah, imagine you're a recruiter or a hiring manager in an employer. You probably don't know any of the applicants personally, probably never heard of them before. So they've got to make a decision. Let's, for example, say they've had 100 applicants for one job. They've got to review all of those applications to some degree or not to decide what to do with the application. So whether they read it in detail or not doesn't matter. They've got to make a decision. They've got to whittle the 100 down to probably 5 to 10 that they might even consider for interviewing. And 10 is probably an ambitious number. So you ain't going to get much time, first of all, but more importantly, The only means that those people have to make a decision on whether to interview you or not is right in front of them, either on a screen or printed out on some A4 paper, your CV. If your CV is rubbish and ineffective at communicating what you've got to offer, you are not going to get an interview because nobody can see the benefit of interviewing you. And that's the only means that they've got to make that judgment. They don't know you personally. They don't know that you're a great candidate. What you've presented them is their version of you. If they don't like what they see, you don't get interviewed. Simple as that. And so many people fail to grasp that for some strange reason. They think it's down to a whole host of other reasons. Unfairness of the world. Sometimes it is, I suppose. Job market situation. Well, it doesn't matter whether you've applied for one job or 1,000. If you're not getting interviews for it and you know you could perform it, the problem's the same, and it's nearly always your CV or somebody's interpretation of it. So this second session, this second sector or segment of your CV, we've opened up with a nice strong paragraph. We're starting to build a business case about what you've got to offer the world. The second thing we tend to do is then say, okay, well, there are certain skills that the employer is looking for. Some of them are essential, some of them are desirable. You may get to know what they are. There will be clues in the job advertisement or in some job spec if you've been lucky enough to get one. If you know what they are, it really helps. If you don't, there are ways of guessing them or unearthing them and getting pretty close to the mark. The benefit of listing these skills is that visually, as we'll soon see on this CV that I'll show you, it reaffirms your credibility as a candidate. Crudely, let's imagine that you wanted to somebody to come around and paint your walls blue for some reason or other in your house. If somebody were to put through a business card through your front door at precisely the right time and it says, I am a brilliant painter of walls in blue, you'd probably give them a call. Conversely, if somebody came around and said, I can actually paint your ceilings black, and the business card was all starred that way, you'd probably not give them the first call. Okay, exaggeration again. But it's all about what people perceive and how you fit their requirements. So if on your CV you're reflecting pretty much what they're asking for, as long as you can justify it, that's a pretty simple thing to do and very effective. So just here's a few things that people would typically put on a CV as examples of the kind of content that I mean. Obviously, for every role and individual, these would differ. I'll show you shortly a real-life CV with some different ones on again. But I guess these relate to some degree to that finance director we took a look at just, and we saw their professional summary. These skills would fit that kind of person's role. Notice again, these are functional things, they're not behavioural. There's no mention of enthusiasm, dedication, team working, or anything like that. They're functional skills that could be proven later on in the CV. That's really important. Do not confuse, when you see an advertisement asking for people that need to be enthusiastic with communication skills, if you could see a bit further beyond the process, what tends to happen is that most employers will have a set of desirable and essential skills. Some of them are functional, job-related, and they could be assessed via the CV. And some people will have a matrix and say, how are we going to assess whether an individual's got these skills? Some of them will be assessed via the CV, so there'll be a tick against them. A lot of the behavioural stuff will be assessed later on in the process at interview or assessment centre, and there'll be a tick against them. So they're not expecting to see examples of enthusiasm, dedication, interpersonal skills, communication skills on the CV necessarily. They'll prove that at a later stage. What they want to see on your CV is all the stuff that proves you can actually technically do the job. Then they'll figure out whether you're actually a decent person or not, and you'll fit into the culture at a much later stage. So focus on the functional stuff. Now, I promised I'd show you an example, and I'll do exactly that, and it shows you how this sort of fits together before we move on to the third key area. So on your screens now should be appearing a CV for Matt Craven, so the guy that runs our business. It's real content. The structure is pretty much the same that we'd show for anybody that we were working with. Obviously, the content will always differ, but the structure is similar. So again, I'm not going to read through this in detail. For those that can scan, read. You can take a look at it before I flip slides again. Very simple opening, just name, contact details. Note there's no reference to where Matt lives yet. It is on the CV, but it's not page 1 is not the place for that. Again, sometimes people find that a bit surprising, but is the most important thing you've got to offer your employer the fact that you live in such and such a postcode or street or town? Unlikely, so don't focus on that. Most important thing is that Matt's got some abilities that he wants to offer the world, and he's talking about them here on his CV. That's his opening profile. You can see it addresses the what is he, senior manager, career coach. What's his value proposition? He can help senior levels get more interviews and job offers. What's he good at? It's clearly stated. Where's his expertise? In bullet points, you can see he's assembled a few bullet points that are relevant to his target audience. So it's as simple as that. So those 2 sections are the first part of building a strong business case as to why somebody should consider interviewing Matt, let alone hiring him. So compare that to what you've currently got on your CV. Again, the caveat being, whatever your CV looks like, if you've got the evidence to prove that it gets you interviews more often than not, then to be honest, you're doing all right. And the most important thing is it gets you interviews. But for those that are struggling or think they might struggle, this format works. It delivers far more effective results. Okay, we'll move on to the next session, which you can see on Matt's CV is called Career Highlights. I'm going to talk about that a little bit as well in terms of what difference that makes to a CV. So the thing about Career Highlights, and we'll go back to Matt's CV very shortly, is that we've just said for him or for that finance director earlier on, we've just made some claims, and I've gone on about making sure that whatever you put on your CV can be proven on the CV at some stage, and at the very worst and latest point that could be proven at interview if you get that far. So we use Career Highlights, or a section we call Career Highlights, to do that very thing, to actually provide demonstrable evidence to support the claims that have been made on the CV so far. There are 2 things that are important when we're writing these Career Highlights. One is the style itself. It's important that you're good at writing here and explaining what you're able to deliver. If you know you're not good at that, if you think that's a weakness, then it starts to point towards making, you need to make a decision about seeking help. But if you're good at that, you can write good content and make sense out of complicated subjects, then you probably do this bit well. Second thing is the methodology that we use. Now, this isn't patented to us. Plenty of people use this kind of methodology, this acronym, or variations on a theme. But we use something called STAR. And it's a way of being able to deconstruct complex events, projects, happenings in your life, and then reconstructing them in a nice, concise manner. Importantly and interestingly, it's also a really useful way of dealing with competency-based questions at interview. So if you start following this kind of methodology and rehearsing it and thinking some examples from your career that you can then package up in such a way that I'm about to describe and illustrate, it can benefit you firstly on the CV, but secondly, it gives you a tool to use at interview to make answering questions, particularly competency-based questions, a whole heap easier. I'll show you an example. This happens to be off Matt's CV, which we will see again shortly. It's describing an event in his life. Actually, interestingly, it's quite some time ago in his life, but that doesn't matter. And one of the benefits of using Career Highlights in the way we use them is you don't have to fall within chronological order. You just pull out the things that are most relevant to your target audience that demonstrate your ability to perform particular competencies. When they were achieved is of no relevance at all as long as they don't appear dated. So it's all about relevance and appropriateness for your target audience. So Matt's picked out this example. Again, I'm not going to read it all the way through, but I'll point out the structure because it's important. So the situation here is the first sentence starting ERAC. ERAC stands for Enterprise Rent-A-Car, just so you know. And the situation is like the scene setter, if you like, the headline, the why is this thing important, why did it exist? So it sets the scene, and the scene is, as you can see, the Enterprise Rent-A-Car acquired a business and it was underperforming in effect. It needed sorting out. The task is the next sentence, starting appointed, and it's the responsibility that rests on Matt's shoulders, or rested on Matt's shoulders at that time, and it was to do some stuff to sort it out, basically. The actions form the bulk of the remaining text, and they are a series of things, normally in chronological order. They make a nice logical story as to what Matt did to affect an improvement. And so he's listed some things there that he's done that helped to then finally achieve a result, which is the final sentence, which is quite powerful in that he managed to deliver a certain level of profitability within a certain time period. Now, he's done that in a relatively modest amount of text. We've actually done a lot of work into this area. You know, how much text should you write? What's too little? What's too much? For a number of reasons, it's a modest paragraph is about right. You'll see how on Matt's CV it works shortly. Most people who do this kind of thing tend to either go overboard, particularly on the first highlight, and explain too much, or they get it wrong and don't provide relevant examples in the first place. But if you follow this kind of approach, you pick the right examples, nice and concise and well written, it's providing the proof to support some of the stuff that Matt's claimed to have on his CV already. Sort of touched on this to some degree, but you do need to be careful here. When we see CVs where people have got highlights on them, so one question is, have you got any of these on your CV? Achievements, career highlights, well, it doesn't really matter what you call them again. Most people have got something, but most people tend to bury their achievements within the chronological order of their career history. They don't draw them out and make a feature of them. Those that do draw them out tend to make two mistakes. They either pick the wrong examples, so they think they're talking about something that they really were interested in. It's maybe the thing they enjoyed the most, but that's not necessarily the most relevant thing for your target audience. So that's one test and problem to resolve. And the other is that they get the balance wrong. So they either mention too few, maybe just one example, which isn't really enough, particularly if you've got a decent career length, or they pick too many, or they get the balance wrong between whatever number they have picked. So the number one achievement or highlight is quite detailed. Number two is then sort of half the size of that. Number three is half the size of that. And then fourth or fifth are almost just a line. And it just looks like you've given up. To the reader of the CV, it looks like number one's most important, but it's too long-winded. I don't really understand what they were up to. Number two and beyond progressively look weaker and weaker by virtue of the fact they just look physically on paper, on screen, as being weaker. There's less text. So you have to be very careful. There is a lot of psychology involved in a good CV. Whether you like that or not, it's just the harsh reality. And just the mere layout of things and the content that you put can materially affect how people view you. Now, whether that's right or wrong doesn't really matter. It's just a fact. So if you've got a great achievement, but it's just an afterthought, and you've spent a sentence or two trying to explain it and thought, well, that'll be enough, it will look like that to the reader of the CV. It'll look like you didn't really mean it, or it was almost an afterthought, and you'll be judged accordingly. So make sure that you pick strong examples, make sure that they're relevant and they're targeted to your audience. So it might not have been a great project from your personal point of view, but if you still achieved something from it, that might be the most relevant one to go with for your target audience. Matt's example was quite good in the sense that it had a good level of achievement. It generated profits within a time period. Not everybody can claim to have got such clear-cut key performance indicators or results, and that's fine. It all depends on what your target audience are expecting. If you're a salesperson and you don't talk about hitting targets, winning new business, converting new customers, that will be seen as a weakness straight away. But if you're a teacher, the kind of measurement criteria are slightly different. You can argue they're still more commercial these days than they might ought to be or should be, but you know, that's a political argument. Nevertheless, it is all relevant. So if you're in an administrative job and you don't really have responsibility for changing the world, don't worry about it. You might have good examples of things that you've done that are worth talking about. They just might not seem that valuable to you, but to your target audience, they don't expect you to rule the world. They just want good evidence to support your ability to do the job. Interestingly, when we're working with our clients, this is the one area that we probably spend the most time, partly because most people find it difficult. Most people are fairly modest, in fairness. They find it difficult to think of really good examples without tripping over the line of sort of boasting and being egotistical, which is not what we're talking about here. What we're talking about is hard evidence to support why you're good at doing something, not about trumpeting how good you are and that you're some kind of superhuman individual. So we spend a lot of time trying to uncover this from people and assessing whether what they're talking about is relevant, targeted and appropriate or not. And sometimes it does take a fair amount of effort to extract from people in the nicest possible way what they've got to offer the world, but it's always there in some form or other. Okay, let's show you Matt's CV again before we move on to the bit that most people tend to start their CV with. So you'll notice so far we've not talked about anything to do with the way Matt actually works. But on screen now, gradually, you should be able to see pretty much 2/3 of Matt's CV, which is the opening section which we talked about, the exec summary, key areas of expertise, the bullet points, and then career highlights. Now there are 3 career highlights in Matt's CV, and that's probably what we go with most people. The reason for that is, well, there's 2 key reasons, one of which is that 3 is normally enough to give people a taster of what you're capable of without boring them or without losing their attention more particularly. Also, as you'll see as I just reduced the screen size a little bit, 3 career highlights allows you to importantly get the current or most recent job that you've had on the bottom of page 1. That is actually quite important. If you don't start your career history on page 1, there is a lot of evidence to suggest that people will avoid you or not select you for interview or take you any further in the process. There's quite a strange dynamic, but that's often quite true. So it's important to get your most recent or current job on page 1. So listing loads of career highlights is not a good thing to do. You can go overboard. So 3 is the magic number. It balances the CV quite well. As far as the career history is concerned, which we'll move on to now, there's some things that are really important. A lot of people either open up their CVs with this pretty much, so they maybe put name, address, sometimes education, then go straight into their career history. So again, if you've got a CV where you're going into your career history in the top half of page 1 or around the middle of page 1, I can virtually guarantee you've not built a strong enough business case for your target audience. They will not necessarily, unless you work for somebody so specific and obvious that by the very nature of you working for them, you ought to be considered a valid candidate. It's unlikely you're going to get a business case made for yourself strongly enough to be selected for interview. Again, there's always exceptions to every rule, of course. There'll be people out there who are getting interviews with a crazy CV. There's normally a reason for that. That's sort of a hidden gem. But for most people, if you start talking about where you're currently working too quickly, that doesn't help you. In fact, it hinders you. Some good examples. If you've had to take a step back in your career, so again, for argument's sake, let's say you're a finance director, you've stepped back to become a finance controller, or you're a program manager and you've come back to be a project manager, or you're a sales director, you've come back down to be a sales manager, and you want to get back up to that level. If you open up too quickly telling people that you currently are any of those more junior roles, that's a problem that you've got to try and overcome, because people will just straight away, they'll look at you and think, sales manager, we don't want a sales manager, we need a sales director. We don't want a project manager, we need a program manager. We don't need a finance controller, we need a finance director, somebody who's already doing that work. And you'll be surprised how many people will give up then, put your CV to one side, and they'll not read any further. They'll not know that earlier in your career you were at the level that they would really like you to be right now. So there's lots of reasons why you have to be very careful about opening up too quickly with your career history, because people will assume all sorts of things just by what you've said, and then they'll make their decision. They won't read any further necessarily. So the architecture of this is really important. That's why we put the career history quite low down onto page 1. We get the business case made first, then we talk about where you've accumulated the skills and experience. It is important that you work in reverse chronological order. Most people, in fairness, do that, but 1 or 2 people we see every month will have their first job first, and if that was in the 70s, 80s, or even 90s these days, that doesn't help your cause. Description of employer. I'll show you an example shortly, but it's actually quite important that you describe to your audience who on earth you're working for. Don't assume that they'll know it, particularly if you work for an unknown brand, or a brand that's not well known through advertising or TV, or even in the industry. Or even, to be honest, if it's a big brand, lots of people will then wonder which part of that brand you work for. So even if you work for Rolls-Royce, for example, and you think, well, that's impressive, is it the jet engine bit or is it the road car bit? They're 2 separate companies, 2 separate locations, 2 separate parentages. You know, which bit is it? Other big brands have lots of different divisions, so you need to describe a little bit about who on earth you're working for. Don't let people assume anything. Provide a summary of your role, very briefly. I'll show you again an example shortly, but what on earth are you responsible for doing? The team that you operate within, what is it? How are you measured? Some, and I emphasize the word some, duties and responsibilities, but balanced with as many achievements or as close to as many achievements. So the differentiator is not what you're paid to do, because pretty much everybody at the same level of job that you're operating in, most people don't have a unique job. So if you're a salesperson, your responsibilities are pretty much the same as for any other salesperson, bottom line. If you're a nurse, ditto, dentist, ditto, project manager, ditto, you get the message. So don't talk about duties and responsibilities at length, because they're pretty much the same for everybody in that space. What differentiates you from people within those, your peer group, if you like, your competitors, is what you did with those duties and responsibilities, and that's your achievements. Focus on them. What did you actually do with the job you were paid for? Sometimes, again, emphasize sometimes, it's appropriate to mention a reason for leaving. Some people do that ad infinitum on their CV, and if it's redundancy, a lot of the time that doesn't send the right message. Irrespective of the reasons for it, it just doesn't look good. Some people go into length describing that some kind of hideous situation occurred and forced them to leave the business. Again, it's not helping your cause. Doesn't matter what the situation was, don't mention it. But if you got promoted or were headhunted or selected by somebody who knew you because of your performance, that might be worth mentioning. Promise some examples. Again, this is admittedly finance related. It doesn't matter. Everybody at any level can write something like this. You just need to adjust the content to fit. So the red text is the bit about the person and how their role, how they fit in the business. You know, it's a medium-sized business, X number of employees. How did this person fit into that? Gives the reader a bit of a clue. The green bit is the team and structure, and the blue bit is what the person was measured on. What would they have been judged on? And then it goes without saying that during the rest of the CV, you do want to expand on some of these things and provide the proof to back up. So if you're talking about key deliverables and KPIs, you don't want to mention how you did against some of those, because that will all come out in the wash at some point, particularly if you're a fairly senior role. But even if you're in a junior role, you can still describe roughly a bit about your company. What on earth is it, for example, size, number of employees, sector, any innovative products that it launched or brands that it might be responsible for that most people wouldn't realise at face value. You talk about how you fit in, who you report into, whether you've got any reports, and then what you're measured on, what you're judged on. So when you're sat down for an appraisal, assuming that you have one, what's somebody going to take a look at and judge you on? Okay, brief pause before we take another look at Matt's CV and explain how some of this again all hangs together. What we've talked about fundamentally so far, and is the most important part of the CV, is how you build this business case. So for those that remain unconvinced so far, which I hope is not too many of you, you'll have seen a structure we've put together, which is opening statement, professional summary, exec summary, whatever you want to call it, some bullet points, career highlights to prove and provide the evidence that supports the claims that have been made in both the professional summary and the key skills area. And then we've gone into the career history to say, okay, this is where we've accumulated the experience that's given us the right to make those claims. So that's all fairly straightforward, I guess. Things just to remind you about so that you can make a judgment on what you need to do, if you need to do anything, in fact. If you're not getting interviews that you know you deserve, look at the stats or accept that something's going wrong. Acid test is if you make 10 applications and you're not getting any interviews, or you're only getting 1 or possibly 2, guaranteed CV's a problem. Whatever anybody's telling you, I would treat that with extreme caution and think, what's wrong with my CV? Chances are it's not building a strong business case as to why somebody should hire you, otherwise they would probably be looking to hire you or at least interview you. So that sort of substantiates my point. And if you're not containing relevant examples of where you've been successful, that's not supporting your business case, which is again another reason why people may not be that interested in taking you further forward in the recruitment process. So those are the key things to look at. Absolute fundamental one is number of interviews you're getting. If you're not yet in the marketplace, you've got to take a bit of an educated guess. Might I get interviews with the CV that I have? Well, you either get into the marketplace and trial it and then act accordingly but swiftly, or you start self-analyzing and thinking, okay, I clearly don't have a business case on my CV and I'm clearly not providing any relevant evidence. And so it's not just evidence, it's relevant evidence for your target audience. If you've got all those things, you should be okay. A lot of people ask us at the end of these sessions, okay, well, what do I do? Well, I've told you 3 key things to do already this evening. Strong opening statement, keywords to populate the CV, make the search engine optimization of databases work well, get you recognized, get that bit right makes a big difference, and career highlights help provide the evidence to support why somebody should be interested in you. So if you thought, okay, I've got a problem, you do just those things, it will make a big difference. I can virtually guarantee that. And so you could go off this evening, tomorrow, the weekend, and affect those changes. That's fine. But if you find that difficult, or you suspect there's going to be a problem, and you don't want, or you just don't want to do it, then of course you can seek professional help. Now, obviously, we'd rather you come in our general direction if you fall into that camp. And so Talentspa have twisted our arm, and they say to us, look, you can run these webinars, but if you're going to offer people any kind of service, make sure you offer it at a discounted rate. So at the end of this session, for those that think you might want to go down that path, and it won't be all of you, some of you want to go off and do your own thing, and that's fine, but any of you interested in that process and getting somebody to help you, then we can help, and we've got some really good discounts that we'll offer you right at the end of the session. So let's look at Matt's CV again quickly. I've shown you so far page 1 of the CV. It's got to the point where we talked about career history. I'll just scroll now on to page 2 of the CV. So gradually the screen should refresh. You should be seeing page 2 of Matt's CV. So this is a continuation of where he's currently at on most of page 2. And then another job which he did with Hayes earlier in his career, but again a bit of detail. And notice with Hayes there's a bit of description. Even though they're a big company, he's explaining who they are, how he fit in, what his role was. But on the earlier career, so now on to his 3rd and final page, I'll talk about number of pages on the CV later, but you'll notice that for Matt's earlier career, we're only listing his jobs line by line basis. That's really important. This a lot of people spend and eat up lots of CV space by detailing earlier career in way too much detail. It's not relevant. It's not you an interview. Remember, your CV is there to get you an interview for the job in hand, and you'll be judged on that pretty much by what you've done most recently or what you're doing right now, and certainly not much into the deep and distant past. It won't make any difference. So don't spend time explaining stuff that happened, generally speaking, more than 8 to 10 years ago. Obviously, if your career doesn't go that far back right now, you don't need to worry about this. But if you've got a 15-year career, 20-year career, 30-year career, you need to explain where you've been and what you've been doing, but you only need to provide the detail for the most recent period of time, and roughly that's the 8 to 10 year horizon, or depending on how many jobs you've had in that time, around about 4 jobs. That's a thing we have to look at on a personal basis, but certainly anything after that time, it's just a line with the dates, the employer, and the job title. Anything that you've done in your career that's relevant and worth mentioning that's older than 10 years ago, you could bring that into your career highlights if you wanted to. The eagle-eyed amongst you will have noticed that Matt's career at Enterprise Rent-A-Car was in his earlier career, and we've only just mentioned that in one line, yet one of his career highlights features Enterprise Rent-A-Car. That's because it's a strong example of something he did. But on page 1 of this CV, we're not saying in such and such a year this happened. We're not dating it in any way, type, shape or form. So it's working for him. It's providing the evidence as to why he's a good manager of change and making things happen. Doesn't matter when it occurred. Doesn't matter that it's actually, 15, 16 years old. Again, eagle-eyed of you will notice on Matt's CV that there are a few other boxes on page 3. I'll go through these very quickly and then we'll move on to LinkedIn before wrapping this thing up. For those that start with education or have education on page 1 of their CV, I would suggest, unless you have, I do apologise, I've gone one too far, unless you've got an interstellar level of education, it's not the differentiator you think it might be. It doesn't deserve its space on page 1 of your CV. So remove it from page 1. If you're a graduate, MBA, got any kind of technical qualification, professional qualification that's recognised by industry, there are other ways of incorporating that message into your opening statement or summary. But everything else, shunt it to the back of the CV and talk about your highest level of education. So don't provide warts and all, particularly if you've got a career of more than 10 years. You don't need to be detailing primary, secondary school, unless secondary is the highest level that you have. And even then, you might not want to choose to mention that voluntarily. There's no obligation to unless you're asked to. So normally go with your highest level of education, professional qualifications, any training that you've done or continual professional development. Don't necessarily mention university and schools by name unless they're reasonably high profile or help with your business case. And definitely don't mention dates, because if they're quite recent, some people fall into the trap. They're quite experienced. They've just taken a degree. They feel all proud about it. They put the date of that on, thinking that's a good thing. It doesn't. It works against them because somebody might read it and think, oh, they've only just graduated. We need somebody with 10 years experience plus. So you get rejected. Crazy, but it happens. Conversely, if you put, I left, I don't know, university of somewhere in 1962, unfortunately, although it shouldn't, it works against you for reasons that it ought not to, but does. So just don't put dates. They're not needed. Again, you'll notice, and I mentioned this earlier on, that your personal details don't need to go on to page 1 either, other than your name and how people can get hold of you. So we recommend name, phone number, or phone numbers, and if not numbers, then a phone number and an email address should be on page 1 at the top of the CV. Everything else should be shunted to the back. Where you live may or may not help your cause. You don't know necessarily how people are going to react to that, so don't let them have an easy ride and make decisions almost on a postcode basis. Don't let people assume that just because you live 50 miles away that isn't something you could tolerate doing every day if that were relevant. We put all this towards the back of the CV. Some things to mention that are relevant. Yes, driving license, it could be relevant. Your ability, so the mobility comments about relocation and ability to move, if that were appropriate. Some people have security clearance, that's highly relevant, ditto languages, and if you're looking to work in a different country or location that requires some form of eligibility, of course it's worth stating that so that people don't misunderstand or make a decision that's unfair to you because you've not made it easy for them to understand your eligibility. And then finally on just a few bits and pieces regarding the CV in general, including the number of pages. You'll have gathered, anybody that took a closer look at Matt's CV, the style of writing is quite tight. It's the best way to describe it. You'll have noticed we don't refer to Matt as Matt by his name other than at the top of the CV, and he's not calling himself I and referring to himself all the way through the CV either. Those are bad habits and they don't read well. So get rid of that if you're writing your CV with lots of references to either your name or by referring yourself as I this, I that. That's not good. On the formatting side, then, it's such a subjective area. We adopt a style. We use a fairly innocent font. We use a fairly innocent font size. There's no wacky creativity or graphics going on. They're not unnecessary. I'm afraid a good, safe option is, a good, fairly boring traditional font. You'll have noticed on Matt's CV quite a lot of white space around the paper. That is deliberate. I'm not going to go into the reasons why right now, but if you think you're clever by trying to fit as much text as possible into a sheet of A4, that's not a great thing to do. It looks wrong. It makes it very hard to read in comparison to some other ways of formatting the text. So if you're trying to get to 2 pages by taking the text to the extremities of every margin on your word processor, that's not a clever option. It's actually harming you rather than helping. By far the better and more appropriate way to go is to reduce the amount of text by getting rid of irrelevant stuff and making better use of the space you've got. Regarding number of pages, urban myths really about this. A lot of people say, oh, I must have 2 pages. And you say, well, why? Oh, because Joe Bloggs said so. What does Joe Bloggs know about anything? Well, I don't know. Unless you're specifically asked by someone to provide evidence on a number of pages, there is no evidence at all that we've ever collected that you should have a CV of a certain length. So the only exception is if somebody has specifically asked as part of the application process to receive information in a certain format. Other than that, most CVs we write for our clients are between 2 and 4 pages. And for most people with a career of more than 10 years, 7 to 10 years, it's 3 pages. Because there's something I haven't yet mentioned which we add on to our CVs, which makes a big difference to their effectiveness and also the length of the CV. Nobody's ever come back to us and said, you bunch of so-and-sos, you've given me a 3-page CV and now I'm not getting any interviews. It just doesn't happen. What people are bothered about and what has driven this urban myth is that people don't like to receive 4 pages of rubbish, 5 pages of rubbish, or even 1 page of rubbish. And because most people assume that they are going to be sent by and large a heap of rubbish, they try and reduce it by populating this myth that, oh, please just send me 2 pages, or you should aim to send 2 pages because that's what people like. And the reason why they like it is because they just want to reduce the amount of stuff they have to trawl through. If you send people really good content on 4 pages, they might not read it all, but by the bit they've read first, the first page, they'll have made the decision to interview you or consider you, almost guaranteed. So really, it's not something to get het up about. This final bit that I mentioned that makes a big difference to the CV, and I'll show you Matt's example to back it up shortly. We add, partly as a result of LinkedIn's popularity, a section which we call recommendations. It used to be called testimonial evidence. For those of you that have a LinkedIn profile, you will have probably got some recommendations, or you might know that they exist. And if they're written by the good people, appropriate people, i.e. people who have either hired you or managed you in the past, they're a really effective way of substantiating your ability to do the job. So we incorporate those on the CV. So good examples are those from people who've managed you. Bad examples are from your peer group or people you meet down the pub every Friday. And they are wholly more effective than putting references available on request on your CV. That's a wholly pointless exercise. Again, it's an urban myth. People have said, oh, you should put that on your CV. Why? Who is going to decide who to interview you based on the fact that you have references available on request? It's just not going to happen. It will make no difference whatsoever. If people want to ask references, they will ask for them, and they will ask for them a lot later in the recruitment process, probably when they've forgotten about your CV in the first place. And it doesn't matter whether you have them available on request or not. You will be asked for them if that's part of the process, end of. So putting that statement on your CV or putting people's names and addresses, unless you've been specifically asked to do so, is wholly pointless. Far more effective is to stick something on your CV that actually makes a difference to you getting an interview in the first place. And if we look at Matt's CV just on the screen right now, you'll notice towards the bottom of, in fact, the last section on this CV, if I just magnify it a bit, be a bit clearer, you'll see that it doesn't take up much space. We would recommend, it doesn't matter whether it's 1, 2, 3, possibly even 4 would be fine, depends on whether it flips it over an extra page or not. But it's just some content, it's just some people testifying to Matt's ability to do the job that he claims to be good at. Really effective. It's optional. If you don't have access to this kind of commentary, don't worry about it. But for those that do, makes a big difference, and wholly more productive, as I say, than putting references available on request, which is truthfully a bit of a nonsense. Okay, finally, a quick mention about LinkedIn, because there's some things that are important about this, and it's not as simple, I'm afraid, as just copying your CV and dumping it into LinkedIn, which is what a lot of people tend to do, and then we'll be done. First comment, bottom in red, you'll notice, if you remember earlier, I said that the vast majority of recruiters and hiring managers can only determine whether you're fit for interview based on the contents of your CV. And we talked about that. Of that 92%, so still the vast majority of people, before they invite you for interview, they'll check you out on at least LinkedIn, but possibly out with the scope of this evening's session, possibly things like Facebook, Twitter, and any other social media that's out there. But LinkedIn certainly, because it's seen as the professional business website and sort of network. So it's important that if you've sent a message on your CV, there isn't a disconnect between that and your LinkedIn profile. And you'll be surprised how many people do have a disconnect, or they have material that prompts a question that you really don't want to have to answer, like how come the dates differ? How come you called yourself this on your CV and that on your LinkedIn profile? How come on your LinkedIn profile you're claiming to be an expert here, yet on your CV you're claiming to be an expert there? You just don't want to get involved in things like that. And that's assuming you get to interview to be able to answer those questions. If your profile's out of kilter, or indeed your CV's out of kilter, it doesn't really matter. But if the two aren't synchronized and look and support this business case you're trying to build, you may get turned down for interview, again, without you actually knowing about it, but right at the end of the process. You were almost there, but then somebody did a bit of digging and found out something they didn't like, and that's the only justification they need to whip you off the list. It can be that brutal. So LinkedIn, it's really important if you're looking for work and you're in a, I don't know, it's hard to describe what level you should be at really, because there's no real easy answer. But if you're in any other mainstream commercial kind of function, you want to get noticed, and you want to build a profile, and you might actively be looking for work, you ought to be on LinkedIn. There are some reasons why you might not want to be. We deal with people who really don't want to be, and those reasons may be valid. They just don't like the presence that it offers, and that's a personal thing, so accept that. But if you want to build a profile and get noticed, and you're interested in people approaching you about your career, you do need to be on LinkedIn. But as I hinted at, what you ought not to be doing is dumping your CV into it, because if your CV is currently bad, you're just replicating that badness if you stick it onto LinkedIn or some kind of version of it on LinkedIn. Tonight's not about technicalities of LinkedIn, and a lot of people get heads up about all the options and settings on LinkedIn, and some people get bothered about whether they should participate in it, and does it make any difference if they're active on LinkedIn and get involved. And most of the answers to those questions are no, you don't need to worry about any of that. The key thing is the content, the message that you're sending, just the same as with your CV. So if you've got a CV with a good message, it will get you traction, it will get you interest. If you support that with a well-written LinkedIn profile, ditto. The recruiters and employers now use LinkedIn so much, they will often find people before they've even advertised for a role or during the process of advertising and pre-select them based on their content of their LinkedIn profile, because it's such a valuable database. It offers so much power to a recruiter and employer. Some of you may have even been approached by people who saw your LinkedIn profile. So it really is a key place to be, but the message you send is absolutely critical. Things that people tend to do wrong, and therefore you just need to be wary of regarding the settings. Underneath your name is something called the professional headline. You don't want to take the default option, which is to populate that with your current job title and company. LinkedIn encourages you to do that if you don't put anything else, but you really don't want to do that for the same reasons you don't want to lead with your career history on your CV. If you've got an odd job title or a job title that isn't reflective of what you're able to offer, you're automatically at a disadvantage. As soon as people see your name, they'll see what your job title is. If it works for you, okay, but if it doesn't work for you, you've probably lost their interest straight away. Also, don't put available now or looking for or currently seeking, because it hints of desperation, and LinkedIn's not the place to be desperate. LinkedIn's the place where you really want to be advertising your wares, as it were, and people will be looking at your profile, and what you want is, in an ideal world, they want to be thinking, this person looks quite good. I really do hope they're going to be interested in what I've got to offer them. You don't want them to be thinking, haha, they're available. That means I can get their salary down a bit, and I'm assuming they're going to be available, and the whole psychology and positioning changes. Make it work for you. Don't appear desperate. The summary text that appears under LinkedIn, again, a lot of people just dump in stuff off their CV and waffle on about stuff that isn't relevant. So that needs to be tight, like your CV. If you've got your CV sorted, the text is similar to the opening statement on your CV. You don't need to provide lots of detail, not as much detail as you have on your CV in each of the jobs or positions within LinkedIn. You just want a summary. You want a hook. You want somebody to think, well, that's close enough. Let's find out some more. You don't want to provide all the information under the sun so people can make a decision without talking with you. And there's a section on LinkedIn called projects, which most people don't even know about, much less populated. It's in the top right-hand section of your profile. And in fact, if you just bear with me, I'll show you Matt's profile, actually. So on the screen just coming through now, you should see Matt's LinkedIn profile. A lot of people say, should you have a photo or not? Well, I'll let you decide whether you think Matt should have a photo or not, but generally speaking, a photo is a good idea. You'll notice that the professional headline is this a bit under his name, and it doesn't say just that Matt is a managing director. It explains the value proposition that he's got, using that cliche again. And then if I just scroll down, you'll see that the summary is again a nice evidential piece of text explaining the benefits that he can bring to somebody that might be interested in his services. Now, Matt's case is slightly different, of course, because he's running a business and he's offering services to the world. He's not an individual actually looking for jobs, but nevertheless, it's still a building a business case situation, not just a random list of stuff. And the project section is an area that, sorry, bear with me. The project section is an area where you can talk about things that you have done, a bit like the case studies and career highlights that I mentioned on the CV. You take them and put them into the project section of LinkedIn, and they work really well, and most people don't use them. So I'd recommend that that's an area that you investigate and utilize. It can make a big difference. It's supporting evidence, building your business case. And then finally, a lot of people don't realize you can actually reorder the sections of LinkedIn. So it's drag and drop technology. Default setting is okay, but not ideal. And so again, when we're writing people's LinkedIn profiles and sort of mirroring the effect we've had on their CV, we reorder the sections so that the business case is stronger and there's a more logical flow to what that individual's got to offer. And so it's worth playing around with that. Now, if there are any specific questions about LinkedIn, by all means ask them amongst the other questions that have been asked, because the technical aspects you don't need to worry too much about, as I've suggested, but the actual use of it and the deeper side in terms of how you can influence people, join groups, and whether you want to participate in that kind of thing is quite important to some degree. But at the base level, to get LinkedIn work for you, if you're interested in people approaching you for your career or job hunting, just get a good, decent profile put together. You do not need to participate actively in LinkedIn. It might help to join groups that are related to your interests, your professional interests, that is, groups that might have contacts within them to help you further your career, and which will add credibility if people were to look at your profile, particularly if you're trying to make a claim for a more senior job. It helps if you're amongst groups that are linked to that career direction that you have. If your groups are all related to your past or things that are more irrelevant, obviously it's not that it's wrong necessarily, it just doesn't help. So think about it carefully and identify people that might be able to recommend you from previous lives if your career is reasonably deep, and maybe link with some of your old bosses or people that are now in a more senior position who could attest to your abilities, and see if they'd recommend you. Okay, I said that I'd offer some deals and discounts for those people that have got to a point where they've decided, I need help and I'm not capable of doing it myself. So there are two camps of people normally. Well, actually there's normally three camps of people. The least valuable place to be is if you've got a problem, or you think you've got a problem, is not to do nothing. Hopefully this evening, if nothing else, you should be able to leave with an idea about how to improve your CV, build a business case, make a difference. So the second camp is those people that would be thinking, yeah, I can do that. I can go off and I'm armed with some knowledge, and I hope the session's been of use for you. The third camp is those people thinking, Christ, you know, this is beyond me. I need help. I'm going to give these guys some money to do exactly that. I'm afraid our services cost money, and to do the job properly costs more money than a lot of people think it ought to, although compared to getting your car serviced or a gardener to do a day's work or a plumber to come and fix your leaking house for a day's work, and it takes a day to write a CV, it's probably on a par with all of those services. So normally to write your CV and LinkedIn profile would cost from us $349 plus VAT to do the two. For anybody with 7 years more experience. Anybody less than 7 years experience, you need to have a conversation with us separately. It's not fair you pay that rate. We're discounting that substantially for anybody interested in taking up the service until close of play next Friday, week tomorrow. So you get the CV and the LinkedIn profile for $275 plus VAT. So it's a big saving, but it is time limited until close of play Friday. If you want to take advantage of that offer, or just have a look around the details of what it entails, then you need to go to that link, which I'm now going to copy and paste and put into the chat room facility for you, because you can't click on it on the screen. And what happens is that we will align you with a writer who knows your sector, knows the hot skills, can work with you to actually figure out whether A, your career direction is correct and you're taking a logical path, and spend a couple of hours on the phone with you extracting all the raw data we need to make your CV better. So it's a complicated and lengthy process, but it's actually quite fun. Most people come out the other end feeling quite positive about life in general. Then we write the CV from the ground up. It's not a tweak, it's not an amend, it's a complete rewrite. Then we get it back to you, tweak and amend it as necessary, and then when we've done that, we fix your LinkedIn profile, code it properly, get the skills and expertise sorted, build the business case. So it's a complicated, in-depth process, but it produces a really good end result. So that's there for those that are interested in that. If you do order that, the first 10 orders that we get during these webinars, and you won't get a better deal than these webinars, I hasten to add. We never go cheaper than these prices. But if you're the first 10 that order, you do get a little bit extra. You get a free cover letter and a great interview coaching package, which helps you practice competency-based questions for your sector, for your industry. Really clever piece of kit. First 10 orders get that for free, in addition to the discount that I've mentioned. But if you fancy having a go yourself and you just want to put a toe in the water, if you follow that web link that I've put into the chat room, that URL, you can order some basic templates, a workbook, and some interview help for 15 quid plus VAT, so 18 quid in total. And that will help give you a bit of a step up. And if you subsequently decide that you still need help, we'll help you out and do you a deal, as it were. So that's this evening. I'll come on to the questions now and deal with them in turn. For those that need to go, thanks for your time. I appreciate it's a lot of information hurled at you in a relatively short space of time. Hope you got something out of it, and thank you for your time and attention, and best of luck to you, those that need to disappear. Those that want to hang on, if you just bear with me, I'll open up the questions that have been asked, and then we'll deal with them. There's been quite a few. It's only fair that I go through them in sort of order. There's not too many that we won't get through in a few minutes. So those who want to hang on now and just listen to the answers, you're more than welcome to, and then I'll let you know when I'm about to shut this whole thing down. So Mark, how important is passive voice? Or active versus active voice? Yeah, a good question, Mark. We use, as you might have gathered by now, I can't remember when I dealt with this versus your question. We use an active voice. It's a small point. It's not a make or break deal, but it's just a good way of writing, and it cuts down on lots of unnecessary text on a CV that takes up space. And in a sentence it makes no difference at all, but when you combine sentences and build a CV, you can save a lot of text by writing in a particular style. So we do use the active tense. OA, that's how you've entered your name, John, not being overly formal or obscure. As a software developer looking for technical roles, can I list technical skills just after the opening profile? Oh, that's a good question. Yes, for anybody with technical skills, one thing, because Matt, that's not relevant to Matt's circumstances, on the CV, we'd probably not put them on the front of the CV, OA. We'd probably put them towards the back of the CV for a number of reasons. Most people, when they look for technical skills, and if you're a software developer, you've probably got quite a few different skills. They are not differentiating in their own right, because you'll find lots of people, the same reason that education isn't differentiating. Unless you've got an interstellar level of ability with certain tools, just listing them doesn't help your cause. You need to have them on the CV, so we'd recommend having them towards the back of the CV in an area called technical skills. And then you could subdivide them into development tools, testing tools, if that were relevant, different platforms, different technologies, you know, Android, iOS, OS, Windows, whatever. So you can describe them in whatever way seems logical. But merely having them on the CV, yes, of course, is important, but having them on page one is less important, because you're up against people who just have the same old skills. Most people search for skills by search engines, databases, just to check that you've got them. So you'll pop up and you'll be seen for those reasons. But what most people don't do is build a strong business case as to why you're a better software developer than anybody else, or why you're in the upper quartile of software developers. And that's all about getting the content and message right. And that will be a stronger thing to get on page one than just a list of technical skills. But the executive summary is long. If you're meaning the one that was on screen, yeah, it looks worse on screen. Oh, sorry, you do. I meant for the macro example. Yeah, it is probably as far as you'd want to take it in Matt's case, and that's a good point, OA. Typically 6 lines is probably the ideal. There's no magic rule. We can't legislate whether people are going to read every single line in the way we'd like them to. We can't legislate for people reading the CV in the precise order, but what we can guarantee is that opening statement's normally the clincher. If you get that right, people read further. If you get it wrong, people junk the CV. So in a way, within reason, it doesn't matter if it's 6, 7, 8 lines long, but certainly if it turns into a double paragraph or 10 lines plus, that would be too much, because it presents the reader with a wall of text. Instantaneously they're turned off and they're thinking negative thoughts. So that there is a balancing act, but I say broadly between 5 and 8 lines is about as far as you'd want to take it, but it's all about the content. Steve, when you say dated, how long ago do you mean? If you mean reference to technology, Steve, if I've understood that right, and if I haven't, just clarify in a question as to what you precisely mean. But I think what I was referring to is that there are some things that people have done in their lives that are very impressive, but with technology that's beyond the pale now. So, for example, let's say if you'd done a really, I don't know what sector you're in, but if you've done a really amazing amount of work with Windows 95, you really wouldn't want to go to market talking about that. At best, you genericize it and just say you're an expert in Windows, and hope that people would understand that you've got a capability there, but that's unlikely. Things have moved on so quickly. So by dated, I think what I meant in that context at that time was you really want to avoid making reference to things that automatically people look at and say, well, big deal. I mean, I can't even remember. I don't even know what that means, or I don't even remember that existing. A bit like saying if you were a real whiz on VisiCalc, if that means anything to you, or Lotus 123, both spreadsheets from the seeming dark ages, as opposed to Excel, which is now the standard, of course. Those sorts of things date the CV without actually mentioning a date. They just look old-fashioned. Steve, again, does your most recent job have to be the first one listed, even if it's not as relevant to the position to apply for some of the other positions? That's a good question, Steve. Generally speaking, yes. Wherever you list and however you list the jobs, if you try and move out of chronological order, you enter a bit of a minefield, because it's just not the done thing, and therefore, as people spot it, they think, why has he done that? There's a reason, and they start to think of all the negative things as to why that'd be rather than anything else. So our argument to get around that problem, because there's plenty of people in that camp where what they've most recently done isn't the most relevant thing to what they want to do, is just make sure that first part of page 1 is as strong as it possibly can be to justify why they should be interested in you right now. You can't avoid the fact that you're doing what you're doing and you've done what you've done, and that really needs to be in some kind of order. The priority and the space you give to each of those is variable and could be varied, but the order you really don't want to mess around with. But our argument, as always, is get that business case cross first. You'd be surprised how much of a difference that will make. Steve, again, what about listing your employment history in order of relevance? Ah, right, okay. Yeah, I've done a range of different roles, not all of them similar. Again, same answer applies really, Steve. I can't say it wouldn't work, but I can say definitely most recruiters and employers that we've ever had any contact with, as soon as you diverge from the chronological order of things, they don't like it, they're suspicious, and it just takes you down a path that's not in your interest, generally speaking. As I say, I think there are slightly different ways. You get by getting your message across without touching on the chronological bit, leave the chronological bit till later. Sometimes you could bend get it on page 1. When I said get the most recent or current job on page 1, we have bent that for some people and delayed that point in extreme circumstances. Now, you may be one of those extreme circumstances, and so that you put even more evidence on page 1 to explain why they should be considering you, slightly delaying the moment at which they find out where you're currently at. That's probably as far as we'd probably go with that. Steve, if I have longer career history with many roles, do I need to include them all? General rule of thumb, Steve, again, without knowing the devil's in the detail, if your issue's more about you don't really want to reveal to the world you've got a, for argument's sake, a 30-year plus career, there's no obligation for you to have to list everything. As I said earlier, you'll not be judged on that. If you mentioned it, people aren't going to be that interested in it. So if you don't mention it, as long as you're not implying in any other way that you are, you're sort of knocking 10, 15 years off your age, so to speak, you're not overtly taking that decision, there's no obligation that you have to mention everything on the CV. Your CV is a tool to get people's interest for the skills that they're demanding at that moment in time. So it's quite legitimate to say, well, here's the best evidence I've got to offer. It's all truthful, it's all factual, but I'm not providing you with everything under the sun. That's fair enough. And just accept that there may be a few people out there who, if they deeply question you, might be a bit surprised that you've not revealed everything to them, but to be honest, it's probably not a big deal, and at least you're in front of people having that conversation by then. How would you show qualifications without a name of the university school and without dates? Okay, so yeah, two separate issues there. The dates isn't important. The university and school might be important depending on who and what it was. So for most degrees, it's appropriate to mention the university. That's the done thing. But for most qualifications beneath that, it's not important. So if you had GCSEs, A-levels, HND, HNC, or whatever the modern-day equivalents are, you probably people wouldn't expect or wouldn't be that bothered about where it was. University, yes. University, whether it works for you or against you, people would expect to see which university it was. Dates are almost irrelevant for any normal academic qualification, but for a technical qualification or training, it might be relevant. In using I in covering, is using I in covering letters okay though? Good question. So I said on CVs don't use the word I and don't refer to yourself by your own name. With the covering letter, yes, it's more acceptable to use the word I sparingly. So try not to start every paragraph with, I mean, there shouldn't be that many paragraphs anyway on a covering letter. It really should be a one-pager, but don't keep saying I. Try and be a little bit more creative. But yes, you can write in that style and tense. Can you please provide a link to download a recording of the webinar? Yes, everybody will get one tomorrow with a link to this very same thing. Greg, what would be the best way to describe taking time out to be a carer for my partner on my CV? Depends when it happened, Greg, and the circumstances, but broadly, I'm going to say honesty is the best policy, and I don't mean it that brutally. Hopefully you understand that. I just mean it's best just to describe it exactly what it was, but I suppose a little bit depends on when it was. And then if we were writing the CV, we just want to make sure that it sort of fit into the right place. And again, after you built the business case as to why somebody should be interested in you for the commercial skills that you have. It should fit into the sort of chronological sequence of things. The only thing I'd be interested in is making sure that, as I say, the balance and the positioning was appropriate and didn't skew people's impressions of what you've got to offer. Jason, any special info to include on CV for someone from another country seeking job in UK? Without knowing where you are, Jason, again, you might have gathered by now, but eligibility to work in the UK, so I'm assuming if you're in Europe, it's sort of a given. If you're coming from outside of Europe, it's whatever visa status or ability to work in the UK, that would be appropriate. If you suspect that you're going to be up against competition, and most people are going to expect folk to have had UK experience or see that as being a benefit, you've really got to take a real good, long, hard look at your business case, because unfortunately there'll be some employers out there who will say, we really do want this UK experience, and you'll find a really tough time. But if you build a strong business case, getting across the competencies you've got, you can accept you'll not win all the battles, but you'll win more of them by getting that sorted. I think that, yeah, it's probably about as far as you can go on that one, Jason. Saka, for one who's specialist with very specific skills, how to address the core values in the opening paragraph, just some generic cliche like ROI, attention to organisational goals. No, I think, Saka, it depends on what you're targeting. So your current skills and abilities may be very specific and specialist. If you're targeting something different, then that might complicate matters slightly. But the general rule of thumb is using what you've got in your toolkit of abilities, skills, however specialist they may be, fit that opening statement, and in fact pretty much all of the CV as best you can to what the target audience is actually looking for. And so if, for example, just putting generic cliches like ROI, attention to organisational goals, ROI is not so bad because you might stand a chance of proving that at some stage, but attention to organisational goals is a bit woolly, and so you really want to avoid generic stuff at all costs. So it means a bit of soul searching and thinking, okay, what have you got to offer, trying to understand what that target audience is looking for, however specialist your current experience is, and meeting those expectations best you can. Latika, hi, I had a question regarding STAR concept. Not always can we structure an evidence into this framework. How to deal with that? Well, I've yet to meet anything, Latika, where we've not been able to get it into STAR format. And if you find that difficult, it's either because it's, not everybody finds it easy. So I don't want to, I don't mean to generalise and sort of point the finger, but certainly in my experience, and I think of my colleagues, we've yet to find anybody we couldn't write something for in the STAR methodology. Where the problems are is normally that the example's weak, and therefore it shouldn't be a career highlight in the first place, or you're just looking at it from the slightly wrong perspective. All we're looking to do is to find an example of something that you've done where there was some kind of background or situation, that you did something within that situation, and that there was a consequence or a result or an outcome. Now, as I hinted at during the main session, that outcome doesn't have to be all singing bells and whistles, I ruled the world, I conquered the world kind of achievement. It could be more subtle than that. But if it's relevant to your target audience and they're expecting just examples of that subtlety, that's fine. But I sort of accept the challenge, if you like. I'm intrigued now because I've yet to find anything where we've not been able to convert it into the STAR format. Dated for work history, Steve, clarification. Okay. Yeah, it depends, Stephen, how far back your work history goes. And again, there's a number of different angles on this. So if you've got a career that's sort of, let's see, anything that delves into the 1980s now, you just need to be careful on when you're mentioning that. On a normal CV, normal course of events, we would put the whole chronological order of things somewhere on the CV. In how much detail varies a lot by client, but for most people with any employment history in the 80s, it would just be a line here, a line there. And so, yes, people, of course, could look at that and they could make assumptions, but there's only so much you can do to hide the inevitable without overstepping the mark. So my comment would be more about you don't want to make any references to your dates of work within certainly page 1 of the CV. So in any of the career highlights, you don't need to talk about dates and times. And that works to your advantage, of course, because you can pick examples from anywhere in your career without mentioning them by date. When it comes to the chronological order of things, then yes, in your earlier career section, which would probably be page 2 or even 3 of a CV that we were writing, yes, you'd have some reference to dates, but to be honest, by then, people are either going to be convinced that you're worth progressing with or not, and the date probably won't by then affect things too much. Sarka, for someone who just came to UK with no UK work experience, what is the best way of convincing the employer that giving them a chance for interview is not going to disappoint them? Should I write that in the cover letter? That's a good question, Sarka, and sort of links to what Jason was saying earlier as well. Again, you have to accept, depending on what you're trying to do and with whom, although it's maybe a bit harsh, just accept that statistically it's going to be harder for you. So, you know, don't get upset about it. It's not a personal thing. It's just one of those things that, you know, recruiters and employers sometimes feel that people have got to have UK work experience. That depends a little bit on what you're trying to do, I guess. There are some environments where your skills may be of big advantage. Now, I'm assuming you've got language skills. So targeting employers or opportunities where those language skills may be of value could be one help, and therefore making that part of your business case could work into your advantage. Now, I'll give a very quick example. I did some work with a chap who was from Greece last year. He'd come over to London because Greece was in a terrible situation. Come over to London, staying with some of his family based in the UK, looking for a job in sales broadly, having a really hard time. Nobody would give him a chance. A really nice guy, well educated, articulate English speaker, obviously could speak Greek as well, native language, really, really good guy, very credible candidate, but finding it very tough. So we just gave him a bit of advice, pointed him in the direction of some places to go, and thought, okay, people got to find Greek as a language useful. Who might they be? Suddenly opened up a number of employers that really finding it tough to recruit people who could speak Greek but were prepared to be based in the UK, working out of the UK, occasionally going to Greece, and selling their products in the Greek market and related Iberian market. Lo and behold, guy got a job because of his language skills, the fact that he was a credible candidate, had sales experience, and culturally understood the Greek market. So that was a little bit about positioning him in a different place, but also getting his CV sorted to get across the strengths that he had. It's that kind of thing that you need to do. The cover letter, you've got to be a bit careful with, Sarka. If you are too emotional and pleading within any documents, it doesn't send the right message, however keen you are. It's all about proof and evidence. So it's understanding what have you got to offer from your skills. They could be language skills, they could be technical skills, whatever they are. Thinking what kind of employers would be interested in that, and then forming a CV around that set of expectations. So in the right hands, your CV would land, and somebody would be thinking, hallelujah, here's somebody who's got what I'm actually interested in, and just accepting that for other jobs, you're not going to be the ideal solution. And however hard you plead and try and persuade people, they just won't get it. They won't understand that message until possibly you're in front of them. So focus on the opportunities that you might have a better chance at. Thank you, Steve, too. Greg's left the building. It's the latest thing that would be on my CV. Thank you, Alice. Something very useful. Okay, that's good. Thank you. Thank you. Oh, right, Sarka. Right. Managing a small company. Small company in small country, Cyprus. Noticed manager of the same position is much more different than what I was back there. Okay, and by writing manager in work history, it scares the employer away. Okay. Can I can I lie and change the manager to technician engineer, something lower to match UK title? Okay, Sarka, that's helpful. Sort of, yes. Now, got to be a bit careful. By the sounds of it, what it sounds like to me, Sarka, is that you could build I suspect your CV right now is not building a business case for your target audience, and you're probably mentioning that you're a manager too early on the CV. Now, it's possible that you could call yourself something else as long as you, didn't deviate from the truth too much. So it is an option that you could reposition your title, as long as nobody back at your former employer is going to say, no, they weren't anything like that. That's a lie. That would cause you a lot of problem. So that is one option. But I suspect part of the answer is that if on your CV you presented a more powerful opening statement that explained the skills that you've got that are more relevant to the UK titles and requirements, the key skill area where those bullet points were reflected what UK people are looking for. You then had some career highlights that again reflected the skills that you have that are of interest to the UK employers, and so you're avoiding talking about this more senior role that people think that you had, which is frightening them. That would work well as well. So maybe a combination of the two. Build a stronger business case, and then when you get to the point about talking about what you actually did, yeah, if you can describe yourself as something different, as long as your employer won't contradict that, and that genuinely you can back up by demonstrating with evidence the skills that you had suited the title, you could get away with that, I would suggest. But I think better build a business case, build a better business case for why somebody should be interested in you. That's it, ladies and gentlemen. End of the questions by the looks of it. So unless there are any more last minute ones, I'm going to hang on for about 30 seconds. Anybody got another question before then, I will answer it, but soon then I'll wind down the session. You'll get a recording to this tomorrow at some stage, or a link to a recording should you want to wish to view it again. That promotional offer lasts until a week tomorrow, and if you've got any queries, visit our website, drop us an email, give us a call, and we'll help on a one-to-one basis. If you've got anything specific you want to discuss, or you want to find out more about the offer, anything like that, just give us a shout, drop us an email. I'm more than happy to help. Thank you to all those who have held on and participated tonight. Really appreciate it. I know it's a big time commitment, but I hope you all got something from it, and certainly there should be enough to make a difference for you. And so I wish you all the best, and I'll sign off now and bid you all good night. Thanks again for your time. Bye.